Welcome to the Living Well podcast sponsored by the Village in Howard. We're a nonprofit organization that assists 55 plus senior citizens in Howard County to age in place. Our 170 members help one another as neighbors helping neighbors. The topic of our podcast today is a celebration of July 4th in 1976. We're your podcast hosts,
Mark Dewey
and Joy Chong. Our guest today is Frank Herron. Soon we'll celebrate the 250th anniversary of the adoption of Declaration of Independence by our founding fathers. Every year on July 4th, I usually go with my family to watch the parade in the neighborhood, fire trucks, marching bands, Boy Scout, and other organizations. We also enjoy watching the amazing fireworks at the Lake Kittamaqundi. July 4th has a very special meaning for me. I pause for a minute on this day to count my blessings as a naturalized U.S. citizen. I came to the U.S. from Taiwan when I was 19. I benefited from the scholarships that I received, learning at great educational institutions, the freedom and opportunities to find jobs as a chemist. Even though I worked hard and lived a frugal life, my American dream could not have been realized without the kind and generous people whom I met along the way. So when I came, I was a teenager. Now I'm a grandma of 10 grandchildren. I'm very grateful. So volunteering is one of the ways that I give back. I work with friends like Mark and Frank. We try to make the communities a better place to live. So a few weeks ago, I met Frank and he told me that he would participate in the bicentennial celebration in New York City 50 years ago. He said he had a great story to tell. I said, okay, come to our podcast. At that time, he was a high-ranking naval officer, lieutenant commander. So I Googled and found out in 1976, 6 million people were in New York City celebrating the important milestone. And in addition to the fireworks, the area shows, a parade of 16 tall ships from 14 countries and 53 naval vessels from 22 nations sailed up the Hudson River. So today, let's hear Frank's personal behind-the-scenes story of how they managed to make the Naval Review a success. So welcome, Frank.
Yeah, thank you very much. I guess I was fortunate enough to be involved with the bicentennial. And I think it was important to share that because we're coming up to the 250th anniversary here in a couple of weeks. But before we do that, let's go back to the start. On the 2nd of July of 1776, the Second Continental Congress voted and agreed to declare independence for Britain. And that night, excellent, John Adams wrote a letter to his wife, and he said that the 2nd of July of 1776 will be the most memorable epoch in the history of America.
Yes.
It ought to be solemnized with pomp, parade, shows, games, sports, guns, bells, bonfires, and illuminations. John Adams was completely right about the second part, but he got the date wrong. It turned out that he actually worked on the committee with Thomas Jefferson to draft the Declaration of Independence. And then on July the 4th, the Second Continental Congress approved that document. So that's the day we've been celebrating ever since. Now, just like our birthday or our anniversary, there are special birthdays and anniversaries, milestones, maybe 21 years old, 50, 65, 90, right? Well, the nation had the same practice, and that evolved into every 50 years having a celebration. And a little terminology lesson here, and using it a little Latin, this chart shows that the semi-centennial, semi means half. So 1/2 of 100 is 50 years. So we celebrated the semi-centennial in 1826, the centennial, the 100th anniversary in 1876, and then the sesquicentennial, and sesqui means 1.5 times 100, and that's we'd get 150 for July the 4th of 1976. And then what I'm going to talk about is pretty simple. Bicentennial, bi means 2, so that's the 200th anniversary. And then what we got coming up is a real tongue twister, the semi-quincentennial. Quin means 5, so it's 5 times 100 divided by 2, you get 250. Great. Now let's go back in time and just review some of those earlier celebrations. The semi-centennial was on July 4th of 1826. The president was John Quincy Adams. He was the 6th president of the United States. We had 24 states by then. We grew from 13 to 24 and a population of about 13.5 million. How was it celebrated? There was a parade in front of the White House. John Quincy Adams invited all the original signers that were still alive to come to the White House for a dinner, and there were fireworks that night. But a really unbelievable event occurred on that day. Both John Adams and Thomas Jefferson died on the 4th of July that day, the 50th anniversary of the signing of the Declaration of Independence.
Now it makes you think that they were both trying to last as long as they could through sheer force of will.
They didn't make it to the dinner, right?
Yeah.
Now we'll go forward another 50 years to the centennial, 100 years. Ulysses S. Grant was the president then. He was the 18th president. By then we had 38 states. The population was 46 million. What was the national mood back then? The Civil War had ended 11 years earlier. We were going through Reconstruction of the South, the Industrial Revolution. His administration was saddled with a bunch of government scandals, what have you. How was the centennial celebrated back then? Well, they decided, go to the next slide. They decided to have an international exposition. In fact, it was the first World's Fair in the United States, and it was held in Philadelphia in Fairmount Park, and it ran for 6 months from May till November. They built over 100 buildings and other structures. As I mentioned, the Industrial Revolution was just getting going, so there was a lot of expositions of first, and when you have and over 10 million people visited that exposition. Next slide.
Yep.
The president came up and did the ribbon cutting, the opening the exposition. They actually displayed the original copy of the signed Declaration of Independence, and everybody was shocked about how deteriorated it was. And so they started a committee to take care of that. And that actually evolved into the National Archives that we have today. Also, that was the first time displaying the telephone, the typewriter, the telegraph machine that was developed by not Morse, but by Thomas Edison. And it was the first time in the public we had sale of popcorn, ketchup, made by the Heinz Company, and hires root beer. Next. This is one of the buildings that were built in Fairmount Park, then Memorial Hall. And this is the only building that's still standing today. I grew up in Philadelphia, and I used to play in that area, and that building was still there, but a bunch of the other structures that we still had around that were that we could play on. The art in that building that were displayed in that building during the exposition was eventually moved to the art museum downtown in Philadelphia. Okay. Now we move ahead another 50 years to 1926, the sesquicentennial. Calvin Coolidge was the 30th president. There were 48 states then, so we're almost up where we are today. 117 million people living in the country. What was the mood back then? It had been 8 years since the end of the First World War. We're recovering from the Spanish influenza. Prohibition had just started. But on the positive side, women got the vote 6 years prior to this. How was it celebrated? Well, they tried again with another World's Fair type exposition. This time it was located in South Philadelphia on land that was a little marshy. The building included the Sesquicentennial Stadium, which later became known as Municipal Stadium and John Fitzgerald Kennedy Stadium. But less than 10 million people there came. The opening entranceway for the exposition had an 80-foot replica of the Liberty Bell. It had a replica of a colonial street in Philadelphia. It had a great big amusement park. The stadium hosted a very famous boxing match between Jack Dempsey and Gene Tunney. And they had over 125,000 people attended that. Tunney won the fight in the 10th round. The fair was viewed as a total flop. It was America's greatest flop. They lost $20 million. There were some days there was absolutely nobody there. There's a picture of Municipal Stadium. It actually was standing until the middle 1990s. One of his most famous traditions after the Dempsey fight is the Army-Navy game was held there for 40 years. And one of the reasons they did that, the Pennsylvania Railroad had a great big yard beside it, and they could bring the Brigade of Midshipmen and the Corps of Cadets down from Annapolis and West Point and meet at a neutral zone to play. I will go ahead to the bicentennial on July 4th of 1976. Gerald Ford was the president then, the 38th president. There were 50 states, so we're finally at our full number. The population then was 216 million. Back then, it was 1 year after the end of the Vietnam War. We had the Watergate scandal. President Nixon had to resign. There was inflation and low growth, characterized by the term stagflation, and New York City was facing bankruptcy. Go ahead. Next slide. How did they celebrate it? Well, they set up a commission 10 years prior, 1966, and they went back and forth for a number of years on how to celebrate it. They decided that trying to have a World's Fair was a mistake because of the 1986 experience. So they decided to do it locally, but have a major event in New York City, but just for a few days. and it involved an international naval review and Operation Opsail. So these tall ships coming together. And as Joy mentioned, there were 50 naval ships from 26 different countries, 16 tall ships from 14 different countries, and over 200 other sailing craft also participated. There was a giant fireworks that evening, and then a couple of days later, there's a parade of nations in downtown New York City. Now, how did I get involved in this? Back then, I was in the U.S. Navy. I was in a squadron that was assigned to the USS Nimitz aircraft carrier. But in 1976, my squadron was transitioning to a brand new airplane, from a propeller airplane to a jet aircraft. The picture here, it was called an S-3 Viking. We were trained in San Diego. I was one of the first groups to fly a couple airplanes back to Jacksonville, Florida, which was our home base. Also during 1975-76, another aircraft was introduced into the Navy, the F-14 Tomcat, made famous by the Top Gun movie with, that they've had sequels for. And the USS Forrestal was going to be the host ship for the bicentennial celebration in New York City. And the Secretary of the Navy wanted to make sure the two newest aircraft in the Navy inventory were on the carrier, but they weren't assigned to the Forrestal yet. So I got picked to fly one of our airplanes up to Norfolk and load it aboard the Forrestal and have it on display during this centennial. So that's how I got involved in it. Now let's talk a little bit about the event itself. Operation Sail was quite a monumental achievement. The ships gathered in Portsmouth, England, and then sailed, did a race down to the Canary Islands, then a second leg across to Bermuda, and then from Bermuda they flew sailed to Newport, Rhode Island. They all gathered together and then sailed down to New York Harbor to arrive there by the 4th of July. Now let's look at a chart that shows what happened that particular day. And it was a mix of the International Naval Review and Opsail. The map here shows a drawing of New York Harbor. The black bar at the upper end of the chart is the George Washington Bridge. The lower black bar is the Verrazano Bridge that goes from Staten Island to Brooklyn. So the idea was to have the 50 naval ships line up on the west side of Manhattan Island, and then gather down near the Statue of Liberty on both sides of the harbor. And then on the morning of the 4th of July, one of the ships, the USS Wainwright, was going to sail down in front from the George Washington Bridge to the Statue of Liberty, and all the ships were going to do passing honors as it went down. And then after that happened, then all the tall ships were going to sail from the Verrazano Bridge up the Hudson River, passing the Statue of Liberty. A lot of them then turned and went up the East River and anchored, and the rest of them went up the Hudson River and anchored. So that was essentially what the plan was. Okay, next slide. These are pictures showing the preparation of the on the Forrestal to get ready. The middle picture is my airplane being hoisted by a crane to put on the flight deck of the Forrestal in Norfolk. And there's a picture of a crew member putting a coat of paint on the flight deck. And in the background you see some bleachers
Sure.
back there. They actually installed bleachers on the flight deck to hold 3,500 guests.
Wow.
Next picture. Here's a picture of the Forrestal sailing underneath the Verrazano Bridge on the 3rd of July. Coming up the outside of the harbor, we hosted the governor of New Jersey, and then the mayor of New York City, Abraham Bean, visited the ship. We were the last ship in the line of naval vessels to go into New York Harbor. And after we passed the Verrazano Bridge, we turned and anchored. This shows the sailors manning the rail, kind of an ancient term. I don't know if you use that term anymore. Personing the rail, I guess, the rail, you could say that. And so when John Adams talked about pomp, well, if you want pomp, involve the Navy, because we got a lot of pomp. Okay, the next slide. This is a picture on the morning of the 4th of July showing all the guests arriving aboard the Forrestal. And you get a good look at the picture of the flight deck. At the forward end there with the number 59 painted on it, that's the bow of the ship. The catapults are there to launch airplanes. But that day it was used as a landing area for all the helicopters that were bringing the VIPs on board. And on the port side up forward there, you see the number 2 elevator, and that's where the Marines were stationed to provide honors to all the dignitaries as they came aboard. That vessel alongside the port side there is actually a Circle Line ship. If you ever went on a tour of New York City, you took the Circle Line around Manhattan, they used that to bring a lot of guests aboard that morning. And they also brought the VIPs aboard using the captain's gig and the admiral's barge. Okay, next slide. So then now we had the naval review itself. The lower ship in the picture there, that's the USS Wainwright. That was the ship that the Vice President and the Secretary of State rode on the 4th of July from the George Washington Bridge down to the Statue of Liberty. And all the ships rendered honors as they went by. President Ford wasn't there yet. He was going to come later in the day. And that's, of course, Vice President Rockefeller and Henry Kissinger was the Secretary of State. Okay, the next picture. This is a photograph showing the VIP sitting in the grandstands on the flight deck. They arrived, they got coffee and donuts in the hangar deck. Then they came up to the flight deck. A lot of people don't know it, but an aircraft carrier actually has an escalator so to bring people from the hangar deck up to the flight deck. So that's how they got there. And there were no expensive seats. Everybody sat like everybody else, right?
Yes.
Yeah. We had some royalty there. There's Princess Grace and Prince Rainier from Monaco, and their younger daughter Stephanie with them. There's Caroline eating some chicken down on the hangar deck later on the day. Also, there was the Crown Prince of Norway. His name was Herron, being invited aboard. Here's a picture of Grace Kelly and Prince Rainier in the grandstands. A little personal aside, I grew up in Philadelphia, so did Grace Kelly.
Right.
She went to a grade school in the Catholic parish, one church above me. She was 10 years older than me. She lived in a little bigger house than we did. And she lived right by a golf course. And when I was growing up, we used to go sledding on the golf course right beside her house. Okay, after the president, the vice president and the secretary of state arrived aboard the carrier after sailing down the Hudson, Then the sailing ships started to sail up the Hudson River. And the opsail was led by the Coast Guard cutter, the Eagle, and there's a picture of it passing the Statue of Liberty. Some of the other ships that were involved in opsail, there's a ship from Italy, the Americo Vespucci. And notice the crew in the rigging up there. Also, it's very appropriate. Amigo Vespucci came to, and was an explorer that came to this continent after Christopher Columbus, and he determined it wasn't Asia. So we ended up naming both continents after him. That's where the name America comes from. One of the other ships was from Romania. Notice the crew was up in the yardarms there.
All the way up.
And then another ship from Russia. And here we were right in the middle of the Cold War, but we invited the Russians up. A couple other things you'd notice, a lot of the ships didn't have their sails at because it was pretty dead calm that day. That's a picture of the bell on the forest hall that the president was going to come later in the day. There's a tugboat there. One thing to realize now, even a ship the size of an aircraft carrier, when it's in anchor, it can move around depending upon the wind and the current of the ship. And we had to keep the ship lined up so those 3,000 VIPs could get a view of the ships going by. So the ship was kind of under power all the time, making sure it was lined up. And we couldn't have any black smoke coming out of the stoke to go in the visitors. So it was a little challenging, that part of it. Okay. Then after the opsail, all the guests went down to the hangar deck to have lunch. I don't know how many thousands of pounds of chicken they had. And then shortly thereafter, they all got back on the flight deck again because the president was coming aboard. He had been down and gave a speech in front of Independence Hall in Philadelphia, and then he went up to Valley Forge, where a covered wagon caravan had all joined there as part of one of these local celebrations. He spoke there. Then he finally arrived on the flight deck of the Forest Hall. His wife, Betty, had already been aboard the ship waiting for him. So here's the Marine Honor Guard as he came aboard. He's been welcomed by the commanding officer of the Marines and also the Secretary of the Navy there. And then the president gave a short speech, and then he rang the ship's bell 13 times at 2 o'clock exactly. And all the major bells in the United States were also supposed to ring that 13 times in honor of the 13 original colonies at that same time. After that, the president departed and all the guests departed, and probably about 4 or 5 o'clock that afternoon, the whole ceremony was over. The ship's crew could go on liberty. The other crew members did go on liberty. I decided to stay on board and watch the fabulous fireworks that evening. A great view, looking right at the Statue of Liberty with all the fireworks going on. 2 days later, on July the 6th, they had a parade in downtown New York City. It started downtown and marched up Broadway, the famous ticker tape parades. And it included all the crews from the ships, both the naval ships and the sailing ships. You can see the crew members from the Winston Churchill there. They actually had women in the crew. That was the date, 1976. We didn't have that many women in the U.S. Navy yet, but that's all changed. And then all the crews gathered for a ceremony right in front of City Hall there at City Hall Park. And that pretty much ended the celebration. Other cities had celebrations. In Washington. There was a big parade and a fireworks. And by that time, the president was back in Washington and he was able to witness the fireworks. So he had a long day. In Philadelphia, they actually moved the Liberty Bell out of Independence Hall across the street into a glassed-in pavilion. And then a couple of years later, they built a permanent building for it across the street. It's called the Liberty Bell Center. And then in Boston, they had a Boston Pops concert, fireworks. And then on July the 10th, Opsail on the way back to England made a stop in Boston. So that pretty much wraps up my experience there.
What a wonderful special day.
Yeah, that's very cool.
Did you get to meet any of the VIPs?
Yes.
Shake their hand?
Our aircraft was on the hangar deck, and in the morning when they came aboard, they came and visited. They toured the aircraft, and I got to talk to all of them. I got to meet the Princess Grace, which was a high point, and a lot of the other VIPs. And then when they came down for lunch, it was the same thing. And actually, I was fortunate enough. You saw a lot of the military people with their whites on. I was able to wear my flight suit, so that was very comfortable. Good. And surprisingly, we could wander around the ship. There was, this was before 9/11 or what have you, and all the security. So I was up on the flight deck, able to take pictures. And when the president on board, I was up on the in the tower, able to look down and see him.
So did you take all the pictures in the slideshow? Did you take all the pictures in the slideshow?
No. I did take pictures, but unfortunately, I don't know whatever happened to them. But after the aircraft carrier actually had a public affairs unit, they actually took all the pictures and printed up a booklet about the whole event. So that's where I got most of the photographs I shared with you today.
I see. How wonderful. Such a memorable day with all the
for sure
programs. And lasted until July the 10th, huh? So went for a whole week, the celebration?
Yes, right. Well, it was a lot shorter than the previous
I guess, right.
Celebrations that lasted for like 6 months.
Yeah, 6 months, right.
Yeah, correct. Yeah.
I see. So what do you think this whole big celebration, what effect did it have on the citizens, on the government?
If you read if you read the opinion pieces from that area back in that era, it had a very positive impact. People felt that an overwhelming sense of unity and national pride. It was a welcome distraction from a lot of the things that were going on. A lot of people thought it was a national healing and a rebirth. And it really did start a kind of a turnaround on the economic situation in New York City. Yeah, correct. I will say I did go on Liberty the night of the 5th of July, and we had to wear our uniforms, our whites. All the crews had to wear their uniforms. I never had to take my wallet out of my pocket when I went to get an adult refreshment.
Because you were in uniform.
Yeah.
You were treated everyone.
Yeah,
That's great. That's fabulous.
Oh, nice. So where were you, Mark, on that day?
So I would have been 7.
7.
So I don't know. I have a memory of going to, I don't know how old I was though. I thought that some of these upsail ships went to Baltimore because I remember seeing some ships go under the Chesapeake Bay Bridge when I was a little kid.
Yeah. There were other upsails in different years. Yeah. Okay. And really my kind of closing comment is now that we're coming up to the 250th anniversary, realized that in the previous very successful celebrations, things weren't going hunky-dory in the country. And a lot of people might feel like that way today,
Yes.
but we all should still stop and celebrate
Hmm.
the heritage that's
Go to the
represented
go to the
by
parade,
the
watch
4th
the
of July.
fireworks,
Correct.
I guess
have the picnic.
75 and 76 were hard years.
Yeah.
And especially we did one of our first episodes about people coming back from Vietnam.
Yeah.
And the attitude in the country about that and how hard that was
Right.
on John and Art. So I think we have a good sense of the state of the country. The fact that people could unify around
Yeah.
the bicentennial was an important thing for America.
Yeah. And the one difference, if you think about it, the country was never at war during our milestone celebrations.
Mhm. Yes.
But maybe this time we will be, unless things change fast.
Yes.
Sure would be nice if they did.
Yeah.
Yes.
Well, great.
Okay. Thank you so much
Thanks a lot.
for
Thank you.
sharing your
Really
story.
appreciate your time.
Wonderful.
Right.
Yeah.
Thank you.
Wonderful.